joint. No, just finish rolling your joint. Sorry, Adam, we're so unprofessional. Finish rolling your joint and then we'll start, because I really don't need like grinder noises.
Chill. It's like part of the podcast. It would be weird if we had an episode where there wasn't a little tap, tap, tap.
Just hurry up.
Yeah, that's your ASMR.
That
Yes.
is. There's always the little ASMR of like me rolling a joint in the background whilst Angie's like talking really passionately about some very important political subject. It's like,
I'm so sincere. I'm like, guys, people are dying.
it's just the vibe. There's nothing wrong with that. So have you gone to any other shows? I think you were talking about you were going to a noise show last time we were chatting to you.
Yeah,
Adam.
I went. It was fucking awful.
Oh,
Oh
no.
no.
Yeah,
How
they had
come?
mask and vax mandates. And when I took
Oh
my
my-
mask off, some spineless little fag got in my face, like actually got in my face about the mask. And,
Oh my god.
you know, I
That's-
wanted
is
to,
no-
I wanted
no
to
one drinking
smack
there?
him around.
There's no bar or anything?
There was a bar. It was at a club in Ridgewood, which is in like Queens, Brooklyn. Like it's on the edge of like Brooklyn and Queens. But it was just like noise is so bad now. It's just like
Yeah.
middle class, downwardly mobile, anarchist losers.
Oh god.
And
Yeah,
everybody's like, well, I think the main problem with noise is that a lot of these kids are like the type of kids who like grew up looking at Nazi memes and like, you know, sort of worshiping at the altar of that stuff. So there's a lot of cognitive dissonance and people like feeling ashamed about their edgelordy teenage years.
Ugh.
So it becomes
so
very like repressive.
overcompensating in
Yeah.
like a
And the thing
ways
with
in now.
noise is like, I mean, the best stuff what like already happened. Like the Japanese noise that came out of the 90s is just kind of like, I mean, there's still decent stuff that comes out from time to time, but like that stuff is just still the gold standard and it doesn't really make much sense to keep up with it anymore. But I'm just like, you know, I used to play in those kinds of bands a little bit and I'm just kind of, it's like almost out of habit that I still like buy tapes and go to these shows and shit.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
don't
the
know.
noise thing, it definitely feels like there have been an influx of people selling their modular racks and stuff like that on all the little, you know, gear forums and stuff I'm on. More so than usual. Everyone's always trading and swapping little modules, but I've seen so many people now just being like, yep, the full thing, 10 grand, please, someone alleviate me of this fucking monstrosity that I've spent like 10 years
Yeah.
dedicating my life to building. It's just like, wow, man, I mean... It just feels, I don't know, if playing that is like playing someone else's soul or something at that point. It's just,
Yeah.
it's too
Well, you know,
much has gone into it.
one of my best friends is this guy Zach Davis, and he used to play in a band called Lamb's Bread, which was not specifically noise, but certainly played with a lot of those bands. They're kind of like a noise punk, but like with lots of free improv and jazz kind of influences. And he's an insanely good guitar player. But because he's been part of like, he's been adjacent to noise for so long, he can kind of flesh out like everything that's bad about it. And like, when we first started hanging out, I was still kind of like tapped into it a little bit more. But after spending 2 years with him, like every time I hear about something noise related, I just go, oh God, these people are awful and cringe. I can't deal with it anymore.
I feel that way about a lot of music scenes because one of my best friends lived in Flushing, New York. And anytime I go to New York, I usually stay with her. And she took me to a rave, quote unquote. And it was sort of trying to imitate the whole like British 90s like rave scene. But again, it's like a bunch of like Antifa people in like
Yeah.
cat suit. Like
Yeah.
New York sucks now. It must, well, everywhere sucks to be honest.
Well, I
but
have
like,
my like crew, you know, I'm very good at like psyoping people and making them loyal to me and such. So I have like, and I feel like a lot of people, you know, sort of felt liberated by my work and safety propaganda and such. So like it kind of created a scene around itself, which is something I'm proud of.
nice, nice.
I think like between like techno and noise, I think I gravitate more towards like techno stuff because at least you can get off your head and dance and whatnot. And there's certainly been some like, I've heard some amazing techno this year by people like Terrence Dixon. I mean, that guy's insanely good. But another really funny thing that I think is like the most sort of embarrassing and shameful of like the wokeifying of extreme music and experimental music is like the woke black metal thing, because like
Wait, that's a
black
thing?
metal. Oh yeah, it's like a.
Oh
I
my
mean,
God.
there's this critic named Kim Kelly. She's avowed Antifa. She writes about black metal and for Teen Vogue, which is like so funny. But
Nice.
she's
no.
and she a good friend of mine. She literally ruined his life by posting accusations without really reporting it out. So I got like a lot of issues with this lady. But like black metal like is fascist. Like that is its orientation. It's like about Nazism and Satanism, sometimes both, sometimes one or the other. And the entire art form of it is a white male middle class reaction to their own sort of European privilege. And that's what made it good. It's like, punk rock was like raging against the system for depriving people. Black metal was like raging against the system for like making life too easy for you. That was like the whole sort of thing. And now there's actually this book coming out. I forget what it's called, but it has sort of the usual suspects in terms of this like libtard black metal thing. And now they're trying to argue that black metal is inherently queer. And of course, they like really kind of juke the sort of ideology of it to their and they purposefully leave off some of the best bands for being fascist, like bands like Satanic War Master. God, there are so many. Goat Moon, like the super fascist ones, always kind of get left off these narratives. But and then but like what's funny is black metal is kind of queer, just not in the way that like they would write about it. What it is, it's kind of almost like a repressed homosexuality at the origins of it. Like these like young guys wearing makeup, like screaming. It is very like gay and alienated to an extent, which makes it good. Like repressed sexuality, I think always kind of works in art, but it's certainly not like out and proud like queer music. It's like very intensely alienated, and certainly there's still like good stuff that comes out, but like it's crazy just how, I mean, I think that's the best example of how just like everything subcultural is left, it just can't resist everything that's happening around it.
I feel like the major difference, because I was super into death metal, so like I was more on that kind of side of things than black metal. But there's there's always crossover, and there was always fascinating like instances. Obviously, Burzum and like that whole thing in like Norway and stuff is kind of what.
Did you see he liked Amy's post last week?
What? Who is this person? I'm so out of the loop when it comes to all this like fashy black metal stuff.
Barg literally commented. God, what did Amy said something about which way Western man, and Barg commented with a picture of his family and said this way. It was like one of my favorite online.
Oh
it's
my
like
God.
sort of like my two worlds coming together. It was so crazy.
I don't know. I was never interested in any of that stuff.
But,
like
I don't know,
there was some crossover though in the like Neopagan community, which I sort of dabbled in, like the new agey sort of thing, where there was like this weird divide between ultra libtard types and like Wolves of Vinland types who were like Satanists or like Thelemites who also were like massive Evola fans and like were all into all their weird fashy stuff. But to me, it's all stupid. Like all of it's dumb. Like, I understand that it's like funny and it can be funny and subversive or whatever, but like, I don't know. I just find it all ridiculous.
That was the thing. It seemed like a lot of the death metal stuff, like it's just how brutal can I make these lyrics just for the sake of it? But it's almost a joke. A lot of it, like "I come blood, cannibal corpse." Like a lot of that shit's just silly. It's just so so brutal. It's silly.
Well, that was kind of the difference. Sorry, go ahead. Jake.
Exactly. I always kind of thought that the black metal stuff was kind of like that as well, but just sort of like just talking about more Christian shit or like anti-Christian shit more, seriously.
Because Alan Moore, it's interesting because Alan Moore is a huge fan of black metal, but his political orientation is anarchist, and he's also
but he's more like Pinchonian anarchist. He's not like anarchoid libtard. He's more.
It's interesting because he started this thing called the Northampton Arts Lab a couple of years ago, which was sort of like an incubator for young artists around Northampton. And they immediately tried to cancel him because obviously a lot of lefty anarchoid types decided that they were going to, join. And then they immediately tried to cancel him because of Lost Girls and some of his other works that also Killing Joke as well.
So misogynistic
and all this other stuff. They immediately tried to like cancel him and push him out of like the quote unquote like left or whatever. And then I just think it's interesting how there's all this like weird like layover in terms of like leftist.
I mean,
politics.
He's such a legend though. He can't be canceled.
No, he can't.
I mean,
he can't be. Never.
I mean, I would say the main difference I've always thought between black and death metal, and I like a lot of bands from both, but the difference is death metal still, it was like a kind of a carryover from thrash metal. The guys like to party, they like to get laid. There was still, they had jokes, they took drugs, etc. Black metal was unique because they were dead fucking serious to the point where it's funny to us, but like they're not in on the joke. To them, they are like there's this Finnish. They really do. Like there's this Finnish documentary on Finnish black metal, and there's this. They're interviewing the lead singer of Horna, who's one of the most legendary of the Finnish bands, and he actually said the music is less important than the ideology. Like black metal ideology is what the genre is. It's like evil, like they really are trying to be evil. And that's what's so kind of interesting about the early black metal days is like, Euronymous from Mayhem, he really was like an art fag, but he created this sort of like principled system as an artistic gesture of like, this is true Norwegian black metal. We're not death metal. We don't care about getting laid or partying. We care about being fucking evil.
Yeah.
Now, with that, like, it's like ideological gesture, it didn't take long for his like friends and fans and the people around him to take it way too seriously because these kids were like 16 to 19 years old. So next thing you know, the crazier members of the group start burning down churches. But Euronymous, because he was like just kind of like an art fag, never actually meant to take it that far, which then weakened his system as the leader, his status as the leader of true Norwegian black metal. And because he outed himself as a poser who was unwilling to live the ideology that he created, was actually Varg's justification for stabbing him to death.
That sounds dumb. This sounds, to me as an outsider, this sounds like some super like fake and gay shit. Like I fucking
you
think
gotta
it's so
read
dumb. It's
Michael
so
Moynihan's,
stupid.
You gotta read Michael Moynihan's Lords of Chaos because it's like it's a fantastic book. But it's funny because like we can laugh at it, but these guys weren't laughing. Like they were dead serious. But because of that seriousness and like sincerity and like fierceness of their commitment, they made this like incredibly novel new art form that does necessitate like a kind of rigorous, like we can think it's stupid, but had they not had that like stupid commitment to that ideology and that way of thinking, they wouldn't have created this sound that was like so. Because black metal is one of those genres, like, yes, there's like precedents and things like Slayer and even death metal to an extent, but it still sounds so fucking alien compared to like everything that came before it. So, it's just like one of those things, like, maybe it's
I
like it's funny and corny that they were so like into it, but at the same time, like sometimes you need to be so cornily into something to create something cool.
Yeah,
definitely.
I would rather just like watch period dramas and go for high tea at like the Ritz. That sounds more like a good time to me
Than burning
Yeah.
churches.
than burning churches and stabbing people. It's just like,
Jake, if
I
you're
didn't-
into death metal though, before we get too belabored by this point, check out the new album by this band. They're from Montreal called Antediluvian. It's mostly death, but it's like blackened death, I guess, but it's weird, dissonant, transcendent. The main musician guy, I read an interview with him. He said he purposefully writes riffs and melodies that he doesn't know how to play. So the music is like him trying to learn these like things that are too hard. Yeah, it's so sick. It's one of the best metal records I've heard as of recently. I can send you a link for it, but it really kind of I listened to it like 6 times last week. It's pretty nuts.
There's a little tidbit I heard from someone that like watched an interview with the drummer from Meshuggah that was saying it took him literally 6 months to learn Bleed.
I bet.
Because just how insane it is, and that's the kind of music that
this
people like to write
podcast is getting
sometimes.
too white boy-y right now, and I don't approve. I really don't approve. I'm not.
Well, it was
not feeling it. I'm not feeling.
It was nice to see that I am fully like embodying white boy summer with my trip to Nigeria and like my African queen.
Yeah, exactly.
Because like Chet Hanks confirmed what white boy summer means, and I firmly fit into that slot.
I didn't realize that Chet Hanks legitimately has jungle fever. I thought he was just joking. Yeah, he like exclusively dates black women.
Very cool.
Which is never my type. I don't like those kinds of guys. I'm sorry. Like, no. Like, I would, if a guy like exclusively dates black women, then I like run away.
What if he was like speaking Nigerian pidgin English on the red carpet instead of shouting out all those Jamaican
just shouting out
lines?
like slurs in Jamaican? No, that would freak me out. Like, I would rather not.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I like his spirit, but he seems, I don't know. He seems like a lost soul, like a privileged guy who's just like looking for an identity. And like he did that interview where he was like sort of talking about how people always like made fun of him for his parentage, and it all seemed too white bread and Boy Scout for him, so he sort of rebelled against it by enveloping himself in black culture. And it's like, more power to you, do you, boo. It's just not my thing. It's just not my thing.
The editing on the bit when he's just like, how many people come up to me and say, oh, your dad's Tom Hanks, you know what my favorite film is? Forrest Gump.
Well, I mean, I think it must suck for I think having like, besides being so rich, et cetera, but like, it must be so hard to be taken seriously at anything when your parents are like movie stars, That's why so many of them just become actors themselves. And even then, they're totally judged against the careers of their parents.
Yeah.
But especially if your dad is like Tom Hanks, I feel. Like that's like the corniest shit ever, It's like you have no claim to pain or trauma. You're just like this rich kid with the world's greatest dad. Like it's gotta be like. It's gotta
awesome.
be.
Everyone universally thinks your dad's just like this sweet, like great guy, and you're just there like, I mean, he's all right, He's just
it's
my
way
fucking
like
dad. Get over it.
There's way more like cool artists, I feel like, who had parents that like, their dads were like rich, distant industrialists or something, and they're like they lived aristocratic lifestyles, but were like neglected, and that gives them like an edge of intrigue.
Well, like, was it Stuart Copeland, the drummer of the Police? His dad was like the director or possibly even one of the founders of the CIA.
Wow.
Whoa.
So
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and it's just like one of those funny little things that he was then in, like, obviously a really famous band called The Police when his dad founded the CIA.
Jake and I are going
Yeah.
for like a transracial John Lennon, Yoko Ono. And it's my job to just like usurp and ruin all of his creative projects.
Oh my goodness.
until he gives me a son. Once you give me a son, then I'll like be occupied. I'll be distracted. But until then, I'm gonna ruin all of your creative ambitions until a crazed fan of the podcast shoots you somewhere outside, and then I could be your widow, your like fucking traumatized widow. But yeah, speaking of fans of the podcast, if you want bonus episodes, we do those for $5 on Patreon. We're also doing a book club at the moment in our Discord where we're reading Sexual Personae at the moment, which has been really fun. Also really fun to see that most of the listeners of the show are just as deranged as we are. So yeah, thank you guys so much for the support. And if you want to support the podcast, we appreciate it. But yeah, moving into the next subject, since you're a New Yorker, one of the things I wanted to talk to you about is that thing that's been going around recently. I think it was on the subway, and it was like it was ads for a dating agency. I think it was Bumble or something. And there was a video of an angry Asian woman ripping down these ads. They had like hang on, I'll send you the link now.
Because it didn't include Asian ladies?
No, not because it didn't include Asian ladies.
Or it included Asian ladies, but in the
link.
wrong way, in a stereotypical way?
Hang on, I'm putting it in the Discord. Were they Bumble? Was it Bumble? I think it was Bumble.
I used to Bumble a little bit.
Isn't it the one for, like, professionals?
I'm not sure.
Is that what it is? I don't know.
That's how it's marketed in the UK
much.
anyway. Like, it's marketed as like a, you know, if you've got like a office job in the city, then you should be on Bumble because you meet like a suitable mate.
It's OkCupid. It was OkCupid.
Oh yeah, I did see this.
Yeah, and basically they are ads for OkCupid, but that have like political kind of identity messages on them. So there's one that has two people whose tongues are joined together, and it says Vaxxer on it. And then there's a non-monogamist one that sort of has a simulated orgy. One that says introvert that simulates oral sex. Another one that
He's
simulates...
just like kissing her belly by the looks of things.
Or, yeah, whatever it is. They're like sex acts. There was another one that had like a finger through an apple that's supposed to simulate a sex act. And this lady was quite irate and decided she was going to tear down the posters on the subway. And
yeah.
a lot of people were sort of comparing her anger and disdain for it to Westboro Baptist Church, like disdain for LGBT visibility or whatever, which I don't necessarily think that that's what it is. I mean, I think people just don't want to see simulated...
Was there a gay one there?
Yeah, there was one that was like a...
I didn't even
realize. There was
realize.
like a pansexual one. There were a bunch of these. These are just a couple of them.
An orgy is fair game, I think. I don't think that's really ever...
I mean, people take their kids on the fucking subway, and like, it's like, what is the purpose of this form of corporate propaganda?
I've definitely seen sexier adverts for like Badoo and all of those like online clothing, retailers or whatever for like underwear and all that stuff. I've definitely seen way more inappropriate and
well, I don't know.
Adverts would give me a semi on the way home.
I don't know if it's that. I think people are just sort of tired of, like, they don't understand what the purpose. Did you just say? Did you just say it gives you a semi on the way home?
As a joke.
Oh
yeah.
my god, you're such a fucking freak. You're so weird. No, what was I saying? No, I think people are just generally annoyed by this form of corporate propaganda because it's not just sexual frivolity for the sake of that, which we see in advertising all the time. It's sexual stuff that's like attached to a clear political message, like being a vaxxer or certain sexual identities and things like that. And I can understand why people would be annoyed by this kind of corporate propaganda, but I'm wondering what you think, Adam.
Well, yeah, given that, I mean, sex sells has been an advertising mantra since the 60s or 50s, but I don't know. At least like fashion imagery had, it's about fantasy, seduction, allure,
Yeah.
and usually
Yeah.
the images are quite formally beautiful. I just think people are sick of having ideology blasted into their skulls every which way they go. And it's
Yeah.
like, I mean, especially in New York now, it's like rubbed into your face to such an extreme degree. And I mean, granted, it's New York City and you can't actually, like, if you live here, you have to understand you're in like the mecca of global commerce. But I don't know. I think she just kind of was sick of it. I mean,
Yeah.
everybody's kind of sick of it, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's just, you know, maybe did she overreact? Maybe, but maybe it's kind of cool that someone was finally just like, God, enough of this fucking shit. Is anybody else feeling sick of this fucking shit?
Someone broke
You
the
know?
simulation and was just brave
Yeah,
enough
Like,
to
fuck it.
put
Fuck
on the
it.
glasses, and they were
Yeah,
just like
take a
not going
Yeah.
to
knife to
take it.
Baudrillard.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with sexual imagery per se. I just don't want it to be so ugly. And it seems as if a lot of the sexual imagery that's like attached to this neoliberal agenda is like purposefully like an eyesore, like aesthetically displeasing.
They probably just had a bad day. It's not as bad as the proposed artwork for Piccadilly Circus. You see that it was looked like it was done on paint
Oh
on an
yeah.
iPad,
Oh
but it was done
yeah.
by a very famous like British artist who's now in his elder years. You must have heard about this, Adam.
Hockney?
You're an art man. Yeah, Hockney. Yeah, that was it. And my God, terrible.
An
I've
affront.
never
that's
been a big
like-
Hockney fan.
Yeah, I mean, I think his probably earlier works had a little bit more effort in than the Piccadilly Circus. Like you've seen
Yeah,
it, haven't you?
Yeah, I saw.
Oh my God,
yeah. I
Really
just
an
heard
eyesore.
you say the iPad because I know he's been doing those iPad paintings for a long time now. But yeah, I've just never
paintings is a
like.
stretch, I would say.
Yeah.
The app might be
Um,
called Paint, but I mean, that's a stretch.
yeah. I mean, I'm all about like stretching the boundaries of medium or whatever, but I just don't. I mean, like aesthetically, I don't find Hockney's paintings very interesting. I never have. Like even his earlier stuff, it's just like here's a cute boy at a pool diving in. Like it's that sort of like ultra because he's like early pop art, but I don't know. Like he's like pop art without like the philosophical rigor of Warhol or something.
His famous one was that guy looking into the pool, wasn't it?
Yeah,
I think.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I don't know. I just hate how ugly it is. And I also hate the sort of message, the kind of myth of individual kind of autonomy or whatever the fuck that's like behind it, and that like one can find liberation or apotheosis through adopting a specific kind of sexual identity. That has always gotten to me, not just because it's like a lie and it creates more alienation, but also because it kind of puts people who have non-standard sexual identities up against like the public fervor, which isn't necessarily even directed at them. It's directed at the entity that's like using that as like a shield. And that's kind of what concerns me about it, because I feel like people are becoming a lot more homophobic now. Like there've been a bunch of like studies done about like the rate at which people like homophobia is like rising. And of course, like the libs will say, "Oh, see, everyone was a fascist all along," because they're so invested in expanding like the basket of deplorables and like throwing everyone into it. But like really and truly, like what people are mad at is like the way that corporations and, you know, big globalist technocracy has like kind of taken on this identity as like a moral cover and as a shield and as sort of a mascot for its agenda. And it's sad because I don't see, maybe I'm not looking hard enough, but I don't see a lot of LGBT people speaking out against it. And the ones who I have seen are horribly kind of maligned by the LGBT community. And it's sad because sometimes that's their only recourse. It's traumatizing to be rejected and maligned for your identity per se within society, but then to have the constituency that's supposed to quote unquote represent you reject you too. And I also feel that as like a Black woman who speaks out against like all of this woke shit and who has a lot of disdain for it. Like I feel intensely rejected by a lot of my Black peers. Like as soon as they hear what I'm about, they don't want anything to do with me. They cast aspersions on my character, and it just leaves you in this like weird, like nebulous void.
Well, it's because you don't bat for the other side politically.
Yeah, but I'm not an idiot. Like, what? So basically, I either have to be like the poet laureate lady or Candace Owens, and like neither of those sound particularly appealing to me. Like...
Yeah. Well, it's funny you mentioned the rising homophobia, because I actually had a conversation with two friends of mine last week. One of whom is gay, but he's like a based Saudian aristocrat gay.
The best kind.
Yeah, he's hilarious. He's a painter named Kevin Tobin. He's always like frantically messaging me and another friend, Alex Beanstalk, like late at night when he's on Modafinil, talking about how he wants to do art performances where me and Beanstalk like torture him in a gallery in front of people. Like he's like a really hilarious pervert. But we were all saying like, oh man, I just can't deal with these gays anymore.
No, it's funny because a lot of my gay friends that are based are like the most like vehemently like against this stuff, and they're the most vehemently like they won't go to like anywhere that has any kind of LGBT affiliation or whatever, like. And I mean I can relate because I feel the same way, like even when like, because I'm like really into African art and African history, but whenever there's an event that's about African art or African history that goes on in London, I feel reluctant to like want to go because I know it's going to be filled with like libtards and hoteps, and like I'm gonna stick out like a sore thumb, so I'm like reluctant to go. But the rising homophobia thing, people want to see it as like a reaction against gay people themselves, which I think maybe some of it might be that, but I don't think it's the vast majority of it. I think it's people who don't understand that
it's a reaction to global homo.
Yeah, it's a reaction to like the ideology of progressive capitalism that's sort of like, using these identity categories as like a moral cover.
Like literally, I've been in the art world for a long time now. People having sex with people of the same sex, like literally, I have no feelings of prejudice towards it at all. It just does not. It's not something I think about. But liberal gays are just so terrible. It's not their sexuality. It's their cultural mores and their beliefs and their tendencies and their online presences and this fucking shit. Yeah. But like, no, like that's like homophobia is like so far removed from me.
It frightens me.
I have a gay uncle, a gay aunt. My parents were total libtards. Like, it's never been a problem.
It frightens me for regular gay people, though, because it's not their fault. And most of them are also, like, against a lot of this shit. And at least in some way see through what's going on. It's the same thing with, like, the Black community. Like, and I think that the libs sort of had a rude awakening, especially around the vax and stuff, because they were expecting, because the black people make up a massive part of the Democratic constituency. So they were just sort of expecting African Americans to kind of fall in line with whatever. But then they sort of saw anytime the more conservative, or not even conservative, the more kind of like skeptical aspects of like Black culture emerge, you see all of like the latent racism within that constituency emerge and directed.
Oh, we thought you were better than that.
Yeah. Like the idea that there's this like unsaid allyship between these identity constituencies or whatever, which is complete and utter bollocks. But yeah, I definitely, I relate to feeling alienated from these identity categories. And I think a lot of people do. It just sucks that a lot of the vitriol that gets aimed towards like the progressive capitalist ideology ends up getting aimed towards like actual gay people, which I don't like and I think is not nice. But
I also think this goes back into something I talk about from time to time, which is that people don't they take this like rate of bigotry or prejudice rising, but then they fail to contextualize the fact that like basically everyone has biases and like light prejudices and bigotries, but like they don't. What people really fail to understand now is that there's like a huge difference between prejudice, which is like a natural outgrowth of social conditioning and can be overcome and sort of grappled with, and outright hatred, which is like a thing you have to do constantly. Like hatred is a commitment.
Active energy spent.
Yeah. You know, some of the greatest, like some of my favorite, like read Che Guevara on Black people.
yeah.
And, you
Or
know,
like Gandhi on like Africans or anyone born before the 20th century on homosexuals. Like
exactly.
Yeah.
And, you know, and like Che Guevara, you know, he was a righteous, courageous man who had internalized a bias, but he wasn't hateful. You know, it was just like a thing he contended with. But I think people can like develop these sorts of obvious biases towards the behavior of gay public figures now who are, you know, such shills. Like, you know, they gays have been deployed. I mean, think of like, what's that guy, the Black guy who's like, I think there's clones of him because he seems to show up whenever there's like a pseudo woke, like libtard event. He's from that Ryan Murphy show. He sings and he dances.
Oh, I know who you're talking about. I know who you're talking
Billy
about.
Porter. Billy Porter.
Oh no, I can't. He frightens me. I can't stand
watch
him.
anything Billy Porter does and not have like one homophobic thought. Like, if that guy is the archetype of gays, which they're trying to make him, the archetype of homosexuality writ large, of course people are going to develop biases. But he's not actually like the stand-in for all gay people. Like, you know what I mean? But they bring this on themselves. Like they elevate a very like theatrical, branded version of a natural social condition, and then expect people to like handle it well. Like if Billy Porter was the only gay on earth, I would literally be the most homophobic person ever because I hate Billy Porter.
I know, I can't stand him.
You need to elevate Tim Dillon, someone that you can't even really guess who would be unless you said it out loud.
But that's the thing is, if you're not performing, like I said on our last show that got censored, because I'm not like smothered in shea butter and like wearing a turban and like spitting all of these empty platitudes, I am not politically Black, okay? Like someone like Robin DiAngelo is more politically Black than I am. You're like a non-person in that sense if you're not performing in the way you're expected to perform in order to fit into this like warped worldview
of one side or the other.
Yeah, and it's horrible. I don't want to. You're either a shea butter Black or you're like a fake conservative Black, like Candace Owens, where your hair is like fried and dyed and laid to the side. Like it's even made me more.
I think it's fake though. She I think she means what she says. She seems like she means what she says.
I don't think she means everything that she says. I think she's just kind of
passionate about what she says. Definitely,
she's passionate about social justice. I'm joking.
She's passionate about the reverse of social justice. Almost.
No, I don't mind her.
She's passionate about anti-social justice.
I don't mind her. People hate her. I don't really mind her. I just sort of see her as like a silly figure or whatever. But like, I don't have like a hatred or vitriol towards her. But like, it feels weird because even when it comes to it, because signifiers now are everything, and like I've always been sort of like bohemian braids, wear my little ankh necklace, smell like patchouli oil. But now I feel like it makes me look like a Black Lives Matter activist. And I feel like maybe I should change my style. And I know it shouldn't matter, but like I don't want to be associated with any of that shit. It feels horrible and dehumanizing. And that there are so many like great pieces of art or elements of culture or even elements of style that I feel like have been totally absorbed into that modality. And by even being remotely like close to it, you're almost signaling to the world that you're like a part of it. And like I feel like that way about a lot of Black culture. I feel like a lot of gay people probably feel that way about a lot of gay culture. Like I was talking to some people in our Discord about it, and there's a lot of gay guys in our Discord. I think they like me because I'm a diva, and they want to like shroud around me. It's sweet. But yeah, they were talking about feeling alienated themselves and like hating it, but feeling afraid to like say anything about how this stuff really affects them because they don't want to risk being like socially ostracized. And it's like, well, you can't blame people for it. And how are you supposed to even speak out against any of it in a more public arena without sounding like you just hate gay people, which isn't the case for most people, I don't think.
Yeah.
I think
I see it with like my uncle, my dad's brother. This is your audience is gonna love this because this is like the most embarrassing background factoid about the writer Adam Lehrer. But my uncle is partners with the Broadway producer Jeffrey Seller.
Oh wow.
Who did Rent and Hamilton.
Yeah. Oh no. Oh, Hamilton. Oh my god.
But when I was a kid, my uncle was like my cool uncle. Like he gave me all his records. He introduced me to the Velvet Underground. He was like
Nice.
super punk rock. He's like my cool uncle from New York. And if you get him in private, he'll still have like, he agrees like with a lot of the stuff we say. Like you can get him to admit that he totally got the Trump thing. It made sense to him why this was happening, blah, blah, blah. But at like a dinner party when like the other super, like their Upper West Side friends are around, it's just like first of all they talk about now is like politics. It's pretty crazy, but it's just like so much hand wringing about racism, homophobia, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, it's so kind of manufactured. Like it doesn't feel authentic. Like this just feels like post 2016 media conditioning. And yeah, it does have these sort of mechanisms of power. They have a way to actually, I think, change personality in a way. And for these people, for all the kind of talk about individualism they do, it's so anti-individual. Like it's what I call basically a nonconformist conformism.
Yep.
Where you sort of like maximize your singular traits to fit into like a broader apparatus, and thus the whole thing is kind of neutralized of any sort of complexity or intrigue or the things that we generally find interesting about people that we meet and want to become friends with.
Yeah. It's really horrible that like now that's like the first thing that people want to know about you. The signifiers that you're sort of putting out into the world are what even attract your quote unquote community, the people who you're supposed to be with. Like that kind of process of getting to know another person is kind of usurped by people being attracted to each other based upon these meaningless signifiers. And then also the idea that they're sitting around talking about this stuff, it just shows that these are bourgeois, like especially a lot of the discourse that comes out of those milieus, it's just like fashionable bourgeois discourse, but it's not even interesting or intellectually stimulating in the way like the Oscar Wilde salons of the past were, where they were like talking about the human condition or relationships or anything like that. Now it's all, like you said, hand-wringing about these like macro issues that a lot of the time they don't even really care about. And I could never live with such double consciousness. Like, I know a lot of people who are like your uncle who will like on the DL be like, yeah, I agree with you. All this shit is like fake and gay. But then as soon as they're around their mates, they're like, oh yeah, fucking Black Lives Matter, fucking yes, fucking
so
peg the
sick.
patriarchy.
Because you have to be a chameleon to like
I can't.
succeed and excel in the world today.
I know,
You
but
have
I
to
feel
be
like
able
it's the reason
to-
why I'm such a fucking colossal failure, is because I just can't do it. I can't fucking do it. Like, I can't adopt that
Yeah.
double consciousness. And people look at me like I'm a freak because they're like, you
Yeah.
have the superpower of being a black
Yeah.
woman who's like articulate and, you know, somewhat okay to look at. Why the fuck are you not using that to your disposal? And it's like,
Yeah.
why would I? That's like the least interesting aspect of me. And it feels like like my soul is like screaming out, but it's like trapped in this fucking thing that I can't get past. I don't even know how to articulate it, but it makes me intensely frustrated.
Yeah. Yeah, what I resent, one thing that I personally resent is that because I don't really self-censor anymore. Like I don't really have to, I don't feel. But one thing that kind of bothers me, or that perplexes me, is that, just by like talking about my thoughts and opinions, people think that I'm purposefully trying to be a provocateur or whatever. But like, I was
Isn't
just
that
at this.
what the internet's designed for? To share your thoughts and
Yeah.
feelings?
Yeah,
No,
exactly. And this is
no.
like even in just like social interactions. Like last weekend, I did an essay for this painter named Shannon Cartier-Lucy. She's incredible, but she happens to be one of my best friend's girlfriends, and she's like really into this new thing that was created in the last year. And I feel very lucky that she kind of wants to help me like bring it back into the art world a little bit. But there was a dinner for the monograph release, so it was like me, the artist, the other writer, the gallery directors, and then like all these art critics that are there like covering the event for their little shitty blogs that nobody reads. And the aforementioned bass gay that I was talking about also happened to be at the dinner. And him and I were talking a little bit about this stuff, but Kahinda Wiley, the painter, came up. And apparently, oh shit, maybe I shouldn't say name, buffer his name out. I don't know if he wants this information relegated to him, but it came up that Kahinda Wiley actually, who's like the ultimate BLM artist, like did Obama's White House portrait, etc. Turns out that all his paintings, all the final touches on his paintings, the flourishes, are done by a white lady.
Wow.
So I was saying at the dinner, I was like, holy shit, I knew Kahinda Wiley was white. I knew that motherfucker was white the whole time. And, a couple people laughed, but then I look over and there's like 6 of these little art journos that have just like, they're so insulated in New York bubble that they were just like, their jaw was on the fucking floor. And I'm just like, holy fucking shit, people.
Yeah.
I'm joking around.
Yeah. No.
Relax yourselves.
No. We're all living in different realities now, which is like also the scary thing. And there are moments like that where you come viscerally into contact with the fact that you just don't live in the same reality as other people. But maybe we should all just sell our souls and start spirit cooking with Marina Abramovic. Like, fuck it. Let's just let's go to the Met Gala. Let's write socialism on our asses and just like play ball. And honestly, sometimes like it literally like crosses my mind that like maybe I'm like an idiot for not capitulating to all, because I know that I could be a million times more successful if I did. but like I couldn't do it. I couldn't live with myself. And I feel like
Yeah,
that's
me
the
neither.
reason why a lot of people in that world are so brittle and clearly like emotionally unfulfilled, because they know, I think on some level they know that it's all fake, and they know that they're serving, a more, diabolical agenda, but they just want the momentary satisfaction that it gives them and the accolades that it gives them. And they have to wake
Yeah.
up every morning and look at themselves in the mirrors, and they hate themselves and it's fucking obvious. It's super fucking obvious, and I would rather not deal with that psychic shit. I have enough psychic shit that I have to deal with than like dealing with intense self-hatred from knowing that you've been sequestered off into this space where you're basically a piece of objet d'art for a perverse elite. And like on some level they must know that that's like what they are, like, for sure. I mean, have you ever had any encounters with any artists who are fully self-aware about the fact that they're like sellouts?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean,
You don't
maybe
have
not
to
so
mention
much people.
names.
Yeah, maybe
Don't
not
get
so
us in
much who
trouble
like.
again. Don't get us censored.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the people who actively shill, I find that, they believe their own bullshit to a
Mm,
large extent. They
mm,
really kind of do.
mm.
Or if not, they're not going to like take the steps or like the time to reconsider or like ask themselves how they really feel. Um, that's kind of one of the mechanisms of control society, is it removes that like self-reflective space, that time you need to actually take a step back.
Yeah,
So I think people just kind of full throttle right in there.
yeah.
But I do have one of my closest friends actually, um, who's a black guy, but very much agrees with us. But it's not even that his work necessitates it. His work is very kind of ideologically mute to an extent. Sort of references symbolist painting and postmodern literature. It's beautiful paintings, but he's talked about it before. Like, sometimes it would be cool to take a stance publicly and say, like, use my position and privilege to say, fuck this. But
Mm.
if
It's
you're,
just not worth it.
it's yeah, it's exactly. It's like it's not his responsibility for one thing, but um, yeah, but I think he does kind of grapple with the idea of like courage and wanting to be able to take that leap. But
Yeah, it's
I think
hard.
it'll happen at some point. I think there is like I think these things are going to start happening. Uh, like the fact that they kind of let what's cool for me now is that I'm so sort of people kind of know me for such a specific thing at this point, and I got kicked out, but now I'm kind of being sucked back in, but it's with the addendum that people are like, if they come to me for like a text for this book or this exhibition or whatever, it's because they purposefully want to flirt with like crypto fascism or like edgy aesthetics. So it kind of works for me, but there's definitely like aesthetic interest in this stuff
Mm,
because it's always been like this has always been a part, like that reactionary sensibility has always been a focal point of contemporary art. It's only in the last few years that it got totally sort of shut out, but the interest in it never went away.
I mean, I wouldn't even
And
call it reactionary. I know that you're being facetious, but like
yeah, yeah, yeah,
I wouldn't even call it that, because it's reactionary based upon the shifting of the goalpost that has occurred fairly recently. But I
yeah,
refuse to concede to those terms. It was purely focused on the excavation of human nature, truth, and beauty, and I don't see that as being reactionary. Maybe like someone who's like intensely postmodern university psyop brained might, but like I don't perceive that as being reactionary whatsoever. It's just a
totally.
universalist ethos that has sort of enveloped the ethos of artists for time and memoriam. And I don't see what's going on now as progress either. I see what's going on now as being reactionary, because it's attempting to force art to serve its ends rather than allowing art to do what it does. So like I would argue that shit is fucking reactionary, and like
totally. And I think that's actually a good point, because the desire to transgress or make transgressive art is totally historically lib. Like, you know, it's like a liberal grasping of freedom of expression and sort of like gripping that bourgeois right, which I think shows that what we think of now as liberalism is just very fundamentally anti-liberal. Like, which of course just has to do with the fact that liberalism itself was always riddled in contradictions, and now it's kind of collapsed upon those contradictions. But yeah, and I mean, I probably do have like a slightly reactionary streak. I mean, like,
who doesn't?
I do.
It's what makes everything
like,
sexy and fun, in my opinion. Everybody does.
Yeah.
Even we were talking about Fela Kuti, who is sort of shown up as this like huge revolutionary African hero, but he was also kind of a reactionary in the sense that he was like a African traditionalist with like 27 wives. So yeah, like I don't know any artist worth a damn that doesn't have a little bit of a sprinkling of reactionary juices in there, just to give it a little bit of sex, a little bit of fun.
And regular trademark, yeah.
Oh, he knows. Adam knows. Hell yeah. I love it.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I don't know any artist worth a damn that doesn't have some kind of element to their character or even their work that could be deemed as like reactionary. But like I don't judge people on the totality of just that. And I don't think I think that anybody who does just has contempt for art. Like they just don't like art, and they probably shouldn't talk about it or really engage with it in that sense.
Yeah, because like politically, like I really feel like the two kind of main things that make sense to me is Marx and Junger. And it's always interesting. I mean, and you know, there's even a piece where Carl Junger like writes about sort of bourgeois hypocrisy and Marx class analysis, but he's known specifically for the Reich and like the role he had in Nazi Germany and for like reactionary thought. But if you like read a lot of his work, he had like amazing insight about contradictions and hypocrisies and like how to overcome those things. But you know, it was only like 10 years ago where I feel like such a statement of like, you know, I find insight in both Karl Marx and Carl Junger is worth engaging with. And that would be like a totally normal statement for intellectual, academically minded people. Now, just by mentioning the name Junger or like having his books in my like Amazon book history, yeah, it could be like a serious challenge to my livelihood if I were still like needing to work through like mainstream outlets or whatever.
It's a demotion to your social rating score, which I'm sure is already pretty low.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I think even like Zizek said in a recent essay that he wants a communism of order, like a communism that sort of can uphold the things that are worth upholding. And I think it was in Spike magazine that he wrote that. And I think that made a lot of sense just because one thing that never makes sense to me about the rightoids is like they claim to hate all this anarchic nonsense, but capitalism is inherently anarchic, and it gets increasingly so as the mode of production starts accumulating very, very heavily at the top. Like this is like an inescapable truth of a capitalist society. So if you really wanted to overcome that anarchic mentality. And I get people are like, oh, because a lot of people just think of communism and they think of like the people that have claimed communism now for like 60 years and they're all unanimously terrible. But if you really like, it doesn't take that much work to kind of study these things and learn their true meaning. Because if you really
Yeah.
wanted to overcome this anarchic, chaotic world, then the thing that needs to be overcome and rectified is the contradictions that are inherent to capitalism. Like as anti-leftist as people might think me to be, that's like the one truism that I've never divorced myself from.
Yeah, same here. Same here, big time. Like I still am I'm still like a massive proponent of Marx's critique of capitalism, but I just see the left as it currently exists as being completely antithetical to achieving any of the goals of Marxism.
Totally.
I don't think that that's particularly controversial. It's just how I feel, which is why I've retreated back into art hodem and occasional political commentary, as you do,
Yeah, that's
but
what I
yeah,
do. Yeah.
you wrote an article recently. Do you want to talk a little bit about the article that you wrote?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Part one came out today. There's going to be two parts. It's for Apopheny magazine, which is a really cool literary journal that started, I think, last year in the UK. And this is actually an essay that I'd been meaning to write for a long time, like at least like a year and a half. But then the book got in the way, because my book's out on Thursday. Actually, everybody,
Ooh,
communions,
congratulations.
get that shit, make me
Awesome.
rich, make me powerful.
Oh my god. He's like Lex Luthor over here.
Yeah, exactly.
Next thing you know, Adam gets money and he's like not returning anyone's DMs and he's like fucking turned into a full-on like ridoid fash. He's best friends with Peter Thiel or whatever, and like
if Thiel wants to fund me, I will not say no to that shit.
oh my
Believe
god.
me.
Oh my god.
But yeah, this essay, because I was thinking about, I've always found it fascinating that David Foster Wallace, Mike Kelly, and Mark Fisher, they all killed themselves within a 4-year window. So every 4 years, one of those guys killed themselves. And when you actually like start to think about their work and their ideas, they all had very, very, even though, I mean, like David Foster Wallace is a novelist, Mike Kelly is a visual artist, Mark Fisher is a critical theorist, and yet they all had very kind of similar criticisms of postmodernism, alienation, entertainment, depression. Like they had very similar insights about what was wrong, and yet they all killed themselves. So like the crux of the essay is like, what does it mean that some of our most insightful thinkers of the contemporary condition up and killed themselves when, like, it's a very bleak thought to me.
Mm.
And the essay is kind of a sequel to this like thing I wrote about the epistemology of the black pill. Because like the ultimate black pill, I decided in that essay is to just say up and fuck it and kill yourself. So these guys took the ultimate black pill in a sense, knowing everything they knew, all the, secrets and occulted truths that they unraveled were like so much to bear for them that they decided to kill themselves. So the crux of the essay is exploring that question, and also almost as a form of coping. I went about looking for the limitations in their thought and beliefs and politics, etc., that might have been the reasons that they chose suicide over grappling with and internalizing this knowledge and moving forward.
See, this is what listening to black metal does to you. It makes you crazy and doomery, which is why you should exclusively listen to dream pop and shoegaze.
Oh, I listen to
I'm
that
joking.
shit too. Don't get me
I'm
wrong.
joking. I'm joking. But yeah, that sounds really fascinating. And something that I've thought about a lot too. And I guess that's the reason why I've sort of personally decided to pursue a more artistic and spiritual tenor to the work that I produce and do now. Because it originally started out that way, and then I sort of veered off into harder politics, and now I'm sort of going back because the harder politics side is incredibly. Gilles Debord is also another one who should be on that list because Gilles Debord also killed himself, I believe, as well.
Yeah, but much longer ago. This was like
Yeah,
specifically
about this time period.
this
But
era.
I feel like you can't spend too much time in that primordial ooze, or you will go insane. And I mean, it's heroic and noble, but like at the same time, does that nobility, is it worth your sanity? Like,
Well, I think it's more of a personality types than it is anything to do with like the amount of insight or like knowledge they've got, and then they've just been like, oh, there's just no hope, and you know, this is the answer, because like, you know, people like Ken Loach, if you want to take it in different directions, like Ken Loach, British filmmaker.
yeah, but he's not
Zizek,
like deep into the rabbit hole of, I guess, social criticism in an academic. In an
he's like,
academic.
he's like a Marxist critic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he is. I mean, I'm talking about Ken Loach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Zizek, you know,
I don't know.
but his personality
maybe
type wouldn't allow for that because he's got like there's
An
too much,
effervescence
there's
in
too
that.
much humor and like
Yeah.
stuff in him,
An effervescence in, like, a
yeah,
spirit.
that would not. Well, then you know, I don't know.
But you never
everyone's-
know.
Yeah,
You
no,
never
I'm
know.
always
You
kinda-
only see.
You never really know.
I'm
But at the
always
same
like,
time, I don't know. I can't say that if you
I'm
know
always
too
kind
much.
of working on the symbolic level too. Like, you know, nothing I do should be taken too literally. I'm a theory fictionalist, and I just think this kind of idea is fascinating. That because not only that they had insight, but they landed upon such similar critiques. You know, David Foster Wallace, Infinite Jest, which I think is the last great American novel, like inescapably. And I think David Foster Wallace had a profoundly interesting kind of central dilemma and tragedy, which is that he was pretty much the last great American writer, but you know, and he had all these like ideas about the logic, the faulty logic of irony and all that, and postmodern detachment, and yet he's still been so fucking memeified that people kind of forget, one, how brilliant he was, and two, he almost is like not everywhere, but he's sometimes kind of like evoked in like a jokey tenor, you know, like but David Foster Wallace had this like very despairing sort of mindset in which, I mean, his fiction is postmodern. There's no doubt, like at least formally. But and he obviously understood how sick entertainment and pop culture and all this stuff had become. But at the same time, that personal sort of personality tick in which he also like was disgusted by detachment itself. So like I think like a great example of this is that essay he wrote, A Supposedly Fun Thing I'll Never Do Again, which is about him going on the Carnival cruise line. And instantly he's just like disgusted by the like vulgar commercialism and the bite-sized experience prepackaged and turned into product. But at the same time, whereas like I think most of us went on a cruise, we would make the best of it and have ourselves like a good kitschy time or whatever. David Foster Wallace, because of his like contempt for irony, couldn't even allow himself that.
Yeah.
So then everything just becomes like pure despair.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that to me is just like very kind of fascinating.
Yeah.
And I think you can find shades of that in the other guy's work as well.
Yeah. It's interesting because I'm working on a new video at the moment. I'm writing the script for it, and I'm working on it with this other channel called Meme Analysis, which is basically a Jungian breakdown of like popular meme type of stuff. And the essay is called Mystery Babylon and the Cult of the Self. And it's basically about like the ethos of individualism under like the sort of liberal order and how it parallels certain symbolism that has to do with like the age of Aquarius. And it's this sort of idea that the age of Aquarius is upon us now. Like the age of Pisces was all about like monotheism and sort of societal meta-narratives that kept order. But the Aquarian energy is sort of like a rebellious energy that's all about shaking up foundations. And it sort of broke that down and has brought us into the era of the individual. But the concept of the individual in and of itself isn't like evil. It's like twofold. Because right now what's being pushed is like the atomized, disembedded individual who's not just disembedded in terms of their social relations, but detached in the sort of David Foster Wallace way from their own, from life and also from their own like internal world in that sense. And that's the manifestation of the Aquarian aeon that's like reigning supreme right now. But the other side of that is like the heroic individual, the individual who says yes to life, the individual who is connected to the individuality of others because they realize that we're all the same thing. It's like a collective consciousness and understanding that I am the other and the other is also me. And it's like these two warring energies that are constantly at odds with each other of where will we be in this new aeon? What Aquarius are we going to manifest as humanity? Are we going to be the sort of Oedipal atomized individual, or are we going to transcend that and become powerful, heroic individuals? And yeah, because a lot of people who are leftist minded sort of like sniff at the concept of the individual because they think it's inextricably linked to capitalism and that we all have to be this like weird hive mind or whatever. But individualism isn't actually like bad per se. It's not bad at all. It depends on the ethos that's behind it. And the current ethos that's behind it is corrosive. And yeah, I'm interested because I'm like very interested in like aeonic cosmology and stuff like that. And I'm an Aquarius too, and I really do feel like that is the next struggle for humanity is like whether we're gonna be like the becoming child or like the Oedipal child that like stays trapped in like the womb. And yeah, I think it's an interesting dichotomy.
Yeah, that seems to be a central conflict of our time.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I don't know why Che Guevara is fresh on my mind right now, but I remember he did some interview once, and the interviewer was kind of pushing back on communism or whatever. But she was like, "But aren't you an individual, Che Guevara? You know, acting as an individual?" And he's like, "Of course, individuals have free will, but with my free will, I've chosen to put my individual power into the collective." So it's like, even if you're like a hard Marxist ideologue, you know that you're still kind of, you have to believe in human autonomy, even against social processes. So, and now we have this sort of, I think, push to remove human autonomy from considerations of the social. This is certainly what Benjamin Bratton, the truly heinous, evil, critical theorist. I don't know if you guys are in this discourse, but he just published a book called Revenge of the Real, in which he basically argues in favor of COVID totalitarianism and what he calls a positive biopolitics. biopolitics, of course, is like the Foucaultian term and is usually evoked with kind of a warning. We cannot reduce our politics to biopolitics or the managing of sheer biopolitical life without considerations of human autonomy. Benjamin Bratton says the opposite, that right now, because of this dangerous disease that 0.1% of people are even negatively afflicted by, that we must remove considerations of human autonomy and individuality to manage the survival of the species. And it's very easy to see how this becomes dangerous. If you're not considering, if the activation of human freedom is not the consideration of your allegedly emancipatory politics and sheer survival, if survival of the race is the only consideration of the politics, then you're literally arguing in favor of what we joke about, the pods or whatever. And this is the totalitarianism that we are. People always just think Nazi Germany when they think totalitarianism. Like, totalitarianism can take many forms. It doesn't have to be the SS officers and putting a handgun in my mouth. It can just be managed to the point by power in which I feel that my life doesn't exist, in which the sheer pumping of blood through my veins is the only reason we're still around.
Yep, and it literally, people need to read 1984 again, as trite as it sounds. Definitely. But they need to go and read that fucking book again, like, seriously.
Not to like play, that kind of like conservative card or whatever, but the whole COVID police, the situation that we went through in our isolation.
Oh yeah,
that was totalitarian as whatever the fuck. I can't pronounce shit because I'm high. Because that was fucking scary as fuck.
Yeah,
because literally,
because we went to Nigeria,
they bring you every day. And if you're like outdoors and stuff, obviously, then they've caught you out. Or if you don't pick up the phone, then they'll ask you why you didn't pick up the phone at a certain time.
They come to your house,
and if you fail to like pick up and like, acknowledge that you're at home self-isolating and stuff, you could be fined like £1,000. So they don't need to come to your house with a fucking AK and threaten you to life or death. They can just financially cripple you and basically double your rent one month.
Or socially ostracize you. You're fucked.
It's just like little things like that. Like any little mistake or slip up or anything can just be like, oh well, we're just gonna fine you, and then your like life is basically altered and you'll be fucked.
But not just that. I feel like if we're going to go the Aeonic cosmology route, this seems like the age of Pisces attempting to reassert itself in the age of Aquarius. It's this idea of a fear of individual autonomy, which is exactly where humanity is headed. Even aeonically, that's the energy that we're supposed to be pursuing in order to individuate like as a species. But like the age of Pisces is still kind of holding us back. This fear of actually becoming like the becoming child, the heroic individual. And like the interesting aspect that I see as well is like the whole retreat on the right back into like Catholicism, or for some certain people, Islam, even though I've seen a lot of white Muslims, like people sort of retreating back into monotheism as like a reaction against what they see as the excesses or the darker side of the Aquarian age, the sort of atomization and all of this stuff. And it's interesting because it's Piscean, like Christianity is like inextricably linked to the Piscean age, like Pisces being the fish being like the symbol of Christianity. And now that the Piscean age is gone, it's not going to come back. And I think that a lot of people have a problem understanding that, because they feel like without those grand narratives, without those sort of parental narratives that once guided humanity out of the darkness, that we are just going to self-destruct. And that could very well be the case. The Aquarian age is either going to be one of two things. We're either going to individuate as a species, or we're going to self-destruct and, be the authors of our own, like, destruction. And all of these totalitarian pushes are, I feel like, the reason why so many people are getting behind them, because it's not just, like, the liberal elite. I know a lot of normies who are against questioning anything that's going on right now. And I think it's a fear. It's a fear of like letting go and trusting, like, the official narrative is no longer reliable. It's really difficult to parse through this information. So I'm just going to go
Yeah.
with the official narrative because it's safer and it's easier. Part of being that heroic individual is being able to take that leap of faith, like into the darkness. It's being able to understand that like you are responsible for your own sort of intellectual development as well. And like,
Yeah.
I just see a lot of avoidance, like
Well,
this horrible avoidant, like autoimmune response in the zeitgeist right now.
yeah. I don't know if I said this to you guys last time, the lost episode,
Oh
but
yeah.
but
Censored.
I have like a real like I talk about this on Twitter sometimes, but I really do have like a genuine. If I was bigoted against anything, it would just be like the middle class in general. Like I really like loathe middle class.
Mm,
It's like the worst class to me for a variety of reasons, but
mm,
specifically because it has no real power or authority, which makes
mm,
it basically historically useless. Um, but also, I mean, I just read this thing that like small business owners are the ones who are really kind of enforcing. And I'm not like advocating for the abolition of small business and all that. No. I'm not doing that like communist shit. But like small business owners are the ones really advocating, like really like enforcing mask mandates because they know if they get in trouble once, that's it for their business. That create
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
that ultra precarity creates an ultra reactionary mindset. Now,
Hmm.
beyond that, it's not just like the petty bouge anymore. The middle class is comprised of both the petty bouge as well as knowledge workers.
mm,
Now, Deleuze, of course, would argue that the evolution from a disciplinary society of earlier industrial capitalism moved to control society with the creation of the knowledge working class. And
mm,
this is a class that is totally propagandistic in function. Their job is to reproduce bourgeois ideology
yeah.
and manage the dissent of the
Mm-hmm,
proles.
mm-hmm,
Now, we've always known this. They've always been annoying. They're on TV. They're the worst. But now, at this moment in which the official narrative of media, of society, is so outwardly false and a lie, and they don't even fucking care how ridiculous it seems because they have this huge middle class ideological enforcement apparatus of a people who are actively being paid to go out there and shill, and b people who are feeling precarious and nervous to the point where they won't question fucking anything.
mm,
So that is, Sam Hain had a great tweet recently about how the middle class politics are only marketing. That's all they are. Well, now they're purposefully being used in favor of carrying out this huge lie that is like being used to transition us into a new global economy.
mm-hmm,
And I think one thing that like the commies really kind of don't get now, because they're so, we're so used to analyzing capital in terms of like bottom lines, like bare financial stakes.
mm,
But capital is so accumulated in such a few pockets that sometimes they seem to prioritize the propaganda over the bottom line.
mm,
So, it probably doesn't make much sense financially to keep people inside and masked and whatever. But it doesn't really matter anymore.
mm,
Capital's not like really kind of flowing in the way that it used to. So it seems very obvious to me that they're gearing us up for a kind of new world order, a great reset. I don't care what we call it, but it does feel like we're being primed to experience a new way of living.
Mm-hmm.
And
Well, you'll be
it's a
spending
bummer.
money online in the places where, you know, the capital has interest already. Like on Uber
Totally.
Eats, on Deliveroo, on Amazon, on any site, basically. Like all
Yeah.
even the online payment services, all of those processes still require like other middlemen or other apps or APIs and stuff. Like all of those, you know, are where capital will have its interest. So like they don't really give a shit about, you know, the high street and stuff, and that was kind of always been planned and has been like part of, you know, the shifting of society into this sort of, I don't know what they expect the high street to be, just like restaurants and coffee shops, which is nice
That's
in
Most
pretty
some
much
places-
areas.
it. Yeah.
But,
Most places
like,
don't even have high streets anymore.
Well, yeah,
it's like
that's
a
it.
dying breed. But
Yeah.
even then, it, again, like one of the things that has pained me the most about my disillusionment with the left is that the disdain for the individual rights and freedoms and autonomies, like the sort of bourgeois rights that, you know, were sort of put on a pedestal by liberalism. You know, it's ironic. It's almost ironic now because we're in a state at the moment, like a stage of time where those things are being slowly eroded, and the left is like, yeah, this is a great thing. This is
awesome.
This is awesome. Like, yeah, let's do more of that. And it's like, you can't even, I don't understand, because it just shows how unserious a lot of them are about their political project, because what they don't realize is without those bourgeois rights and freedoms, you can't do anything politically meaningful in terms of quote unquote organizing comrade, or even having
Totally.
the avenue to express your concerns about the world to other fucking people. So yeah, it's just sort of a skin suit that they're wearing. None of them actually care about the positive transformation of reality, and they're happy to be the Oedipal child. Like, you see it within the culture of the left, which is like, it's not even just the left, the right ways are like this too, but it's like that incredibly online, atomized, consumerist subject is like the celebrated icon to them. It's the most individuated person, like, you know, the Vosh type. And it's just like that, the Vosh is basically the sort of
Penultimate.
archetypal dark
Yeah.
Aquarius child. I'd be interested to know what his astrology sign is, but he's like the bad Aquarius. And like the individuated individual, the liberated individual, the person, like the lady who tore the fucking sign down. That was like a moment of that Aquarian energy. And even though I don't always agree with how it manifests, I recognize it when I see it. And I those moments in time are so fucking important to seize upon. Somebody taking their power into their own hands, somebody grasping the reins of their own destiny. Despite all odds, despite all limiting factors, despite all opposition, because obviously we have a lot working against us, so it's difficult to exercise any of that shit. But despite that, that energy breaks through. But whenever the left sees that energy break through, it despises it. It's like, oh, that's evil. Fuck that. They want to be in the pod. They want to be in the womb. They want to eat the bugs. And it terrifies me because that's not the future that I want for our species.
Yeah.
It
I hate
bums
to
me
sound
out.
like a boomer, but it kind of feels like it's the end of the world. And, you know, the left being the state it is, like, there's not going to be the radical changes needed to, like, you know, really satiate the environment and save the planet and, like, live for, you know, generations and generations. Maybe another generation, maybe one more after that even. But then...
Yeah.
You know, so I'm a bit of a boomer, and it's just like the end's here, boys. Let's
just grill and
let's
chill.
just enjoy it and
You're terrible.
try to live your life the best you can.
He's
and
like a
make the most of
he's
your
doing
family
the-
and the people around you.
I agree.
Without sounding
I'm not
like
gonna-
Heaven's Gate, or I'm going to pass you some sort of like, you know, cup with some mysterious liquid in it that will take you off onto an asteroid. But like, you know, just enjoy
Jake
yourself.
Applewhite.
You know, just enjoy yourself.
No,
We're
I
all here.
get it. I get that feeling. I agree to an extent.
The biggest evolution in my politics came, I think, from like seeing how the left reacted to the Trump movement. Just because, like, I wrote this actually in a piece about the artist Wade Guyton, who did this like really terrible like too late to the party anti-Trump show earlier this year. Because to me, like, for one thing, like, the Trump movement was like very aesthetically, like, artistically interesting. It was so kind of like libidinal and free, and the hats and the colors and like the people sort of joyously, it was like a joyous vulgarity to it. But if I'm like a serious, disciplined Marxist or Leninist, and I see this predominantly working class movement of people psyched about politics, and psyched specifically about politics to shiv the ruling order, even if it doesn't matter, even if it's not like Marxist or communist in orientation, it seems to me like you would at least see some opportunity in that for activating a kind of class consciousness. But from like day one, I mean, always a few exceptions, of course, but like from day one, even like the most, the Adolf Reeds of the world, like, it was just constant fucking hand wringing about this like reactionary white supremacist people movement, and it was just like a drag, because you just see at the end of the day, there's no difference between these allegedly serious leftoid ideologues and thinkers and the fucking party. Like, it's just partisan politics. That's all it is. It's a drag.
Basically. And yeah, I had the exact same feelings after, because during the Trump movement I was one of those like weird libtards or whatever, but after it sort of crystallized this notion in my head that the left, or what purports to be the left, is never capable of saying yes and, they always have to say no but, and like it's incredibly it's incredibly fucking condescending. Like when I saw the lady ripping down those things on the subway, my instinct was to say yes, and this is the reason why this shit is happening. There's never that impulse. It's always, no, you are not smart enough, you are not good enough, you are not capable of being an individual. And the times when you exercise your heroic individuality are all flawed, because you are deeply fucking flawed. It's this fucking moralistic Christian Piscean reaction against the fucking new aeon, bitch, and it's gonna it's gonna assert itself no matter what.
Well, I think of someone like Max Blumenthal, right? And, Blumenthal has largely, he's been courageous at a lot of points in his career. And certainly he's done some great work as a journalist. And it's not always been easy to be so outwardly anti-Israel. So, like, whatever, give him his props where props are due or whatever. But, like, he just, over the last couple of months came out against lockdowns and masks and stuff, and it's just like, if the best among you, their still first instinct is to go with the predominant libtard narrative, and it's always sort of this like, oh, but people are dying. Like, I hate that so much. Like, people die all the fucking time. Like, we're mortal. Like, we die. But like, if you're not even allowed to like make the case between like a simple risk reward factor, like assessment concerning things like COVID, then you're basically fucked. But yeah, like, I mean, I saw that Blumenthal recently was like doing sort of the media junket, finally being like, I had this realization that COVID has been beneficial to the ruling class. I'm like, bitch, you just realized this? You're supposed to be way smarter than me, man. Like,
they're all cowards. They're all cowards. They're all cowards. Like, even people who last year I thought, oh, these guys are cool. Like, they're critical of like all the things that I'm critical of, and they see through the fuckery. As soon as like the election swung past, and then COVID and stuff, I saw that there's no substantive or ethical difference between what they believe and like the line of the Democratic Party, basically. That like being sort of visible on the left is all about finding ways of concealing that you're just a Democrat, basically, like constantly sort of reinventing yourself or creating this like myth of dynamism. And it's very much the same on the right. Like, it's been weird being in the media, in this media game, and then also being politically homeless, because you have to bat for, because even I feel like people like, I don't want to say someone like Tim Dillon because I don't know, but people who are sort of adjacent to him, even though they're critical of a lot of this stuff, they still vote for the Democrats for sure. Like someone like Sam Harris or someone, I'm sure they still vote blue no matter who. And then on the right, even though, you know, you may have commonalities with certain people on the right, even though you may be critical of some similar cultural trends, or you may have certain grievances what to do with like the economy or class in common with them, you're also persona non grata to them too, because they don't want to take in strays into, and inevitably you're of no use to them unless you're like doing electoral politics and leading people down the pipeline of voting for the next Republican candidate to own the libs. And like, I find that shit so tiresome, and I don't want to be a part of any of it. I don't want to be a fucking part of any of it. I want to stay the fuck as far away from that shit as possible. But it seems like there's constant media pressure on people to take that side. And I didn't realize how deep that media pressure actually like really is, which is why a lot of these people just capitulate, because they need to keep their sinecures and, you know, make sure that they can pay their mortgages or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
But anyway, thank you so much, Adam, for coming on. We really enjoyed having you on, as usual, and let's hope that this episode doesn't get censored and like disappear like our last one. Awesome. Thank you so much. And yeah, if for $5 a month you can get access to bonus episodes of Low Society, we have the episode that got lost with Adam up on Patreon. So yeah, it's doing good over there. And also, if you want to join the book club, we are currently reading Sexual Personae, and you can do that by becoming a Patreon. It was lovely talking to you all. Goodbye.
Bye.